This is The Strategy Inside Everything. I'm Adam Pierno. The Strategy Inside Everything is the podcast for people who think for a living. If this conversation gives you an idea, leads to a question, or makes you want to push back on something you hear, go to that'snotaninsight.com, where you can leave a message or send me a voicemail. The best and most interesting will be added to the future episodes, and I can't wait to hear from you. All right, welcome back to another episode of The Strategy Inside Everything. I am here with my fellow Boston University Terrier. We're excited. We started talking already, and we're ready to get this conversation going. I have a partner and managing director at MUH-TAY-ZIK HOF-FER, Carolina Cruz-Letelier. She's going to pronounce that name properly for me. How'd I do?
It was very good, Adam. Carolina Cruz-Letelier. You got to roll your R's. You'll get there.
I'm not capable. It would take me a lot of practice to get there. Before we get going, Carolina, I wanted you to give people a sense of your background because, like a lot of people that come on, it's not exactly a straight line. You jumped around and did some fun stuff. Give people a sense of what you've done and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. Great question. I did not have a linear path. I actually think a lot of wonderful people in advertising tend to not have a linear path, which we talked about before this.
Agree.
So I actually went to school in Boston, much like you did. I graduated a year early, much to my dad's joy. Saved him like $46,000 or so. And I just bounced around for a year because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was a store manager in retail for a year and just like got to know humanity. Because retail is the cruel, cruel world. And you kind of get a sense for what people are all about. So I did that for a year. And then I had a group of girlfriends who were graduating from Boston a year later. And they were like, we're moving to New York. I was like, great. That sounds lovely. I had just met my now husband. So we did 3 years long distance. That's a whole separate podcast.
That's a couple of episodes, probably.
Yeah. And then I moved to New York without a job. Didn't know what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to be in some sort of a communications thing. I studied film and television in college and loved that space, creative spaces, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it living in New York because I thought you had to be in LA to make that happen for yourself. So I ended up working in ad sales at Fuse, which is a music network. At that point, I believe it was owned by Madison Square Garden. I have no idea who owns it now.
Was it? It was Much Music and then it turned to Fuse? Is that the same?
It was a number of things. But the best part was because it was owned by MSG, we got like concert tickets all the time for free. They would just be like, hey, there's Foo Fighters tonight. Who wants to go? It was amazing. Did that for 3 years. And then my now husband had an opportunity to move to the Bay Area. Neither one of us had lived on the West Coast. So we were like, we have to do this one. You're going to have another opportunity like this. Moved again to San Francisco, no job, but had a friend who had a friend at Goodby Silverstein and Partners. And she's like, you should just meet them. They're supposed to be the best. And I had friends who worked in advertising for many years. And it was brutal when you're a junior in advertising and in New York in particular. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not into that. Not for me. Thank you so much. I'll figure this out. And then 2 months goes down and I was like, I guess I should just meet people. That sounds like the right thing to be doing. So I met with some folks at Goodby and had these like transformational, life-changing interviews with people who I was like, I must be in these doors. This is for me.
Seems like a lot of those meetings happen at Goodby.
Yeah. So strange, but wonderful. You're like crying in an interview going, what? I love these people so much. It's so weird. But I just knew that was going to be a place where I was going to learn and grow and all those things. So I ended up at Goodby, worked there for 2 years, and then realized that I needed to be somewhere that was going to make me get out of my shell and be seen. Because when you're in a place like Goodby, you're 400 to 600 people. You don't necessarily get put in the spotlight or have to be on your toes a lot. And I felt like I knew at that moment I needed to be on my toes and really challenge myself. So I went to this small agency called MUH-TAY-ZIK HOF-FER, again, through a connection, and have been there now for over 10 years, which is madness.
That's a long run. Yeah.
A very, very long run. And I think the thing working at a small agency too, it's like it changes and evolves every 2 to 3 years, like what you're doing, the types of clients you're doing, the type of work you're doing. It keeps it really interesting. And then there's always different dynamics of humans coming in and out the door too. So you're not feeling like you're missing out on any learning dynamics either, because you just always have really smart people who are coming in, bringing their talent, helping you just like take in a little bit of it and then keep going. So it's been a really weird wonderful journey that has gotten me here. And I still think like, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? I don't know, but it's so fun right now. And that's what I'm focusing on.
Has that always been your attitude? It sounds like you're able to figure out what the right now is and leverage that and kind of make the most out of that, like walking in the doors at Goodby, or figuring out, the benefit of being in retail is that I get to learn about people. The benefit of being at Fuse is all these free tickets. Like, it seems like you're able to, free tickets is an obvious upside.
One part of them, yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like that's something, the strength of yours. Is that something you've noticed?
Yes, I would say that I call myself a realistic optimist, and that I am always looking at the opportunity in every door and every situation that I'm in. But I can also understand the potential highs and lows of any of those opportunities.
Yeah.
Just so that I can continue to bob and weave and evolve and make sure that I can take advantage of anything that's coming my way. But I'm realistic about the things that I might be giving up in any of those moments. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I just think it's having that knowledge and understanding and self-awareness to be able to evolve when you need to. When
you move to, there's so many places I can jump in based on the introduction you just gave and the conversation I'm hoping to have. But when you moved to the Bay Area, you moved without a job. I've done that in my career once, and there's a benefit to it. How did you, because you're able to explore and figure out, this is where I'm being drawn, or this is lucky I met these people, or sometimes it doesn't work out so nicely. But tell me about what you were thinking in that 2 months before you landed at Goodby, or before you started that search there, and kind of the open-mindedness. And how you think about that now.
Yeah, I've done it twice now, moving without a job.
Oh, you did? Yeah, you did it in New York too.
New York too. And it's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, because I think you just learn a lot about yourself, and you do a lot of self-reflection and a lot of self-doubt, and then a lot of being your own cheerleader, and there's a lot of emotions, and you're like, I should just be doing more things with my time. I could learn to cook. I could work out. Wouldn't it be cool if I worked out every day? But I think you also realize, like, how do I really want to be spending my time, and who are the types of people that I want to surround myself with? And I'm a naturally curious person, which I pick up you are the same. So there's also those moments where I think I could be learning more about this and this and this. And you start to get overwhelmed with the potential that's out there.
Yeah, and then you just end up on the couch watching TV because you're like, well, there's 50 things. I don't even know which thing to start with.
Yeah, and thankfully, streaming wasn't a thing when I was like, that's how long it's been. Like, streaming didn't exist. You still have to get DVDs from Netflix in the mail. Yeah. So I didn't have the benefit of being able to just sit there and consume like whole seasons of whatever, which I think was a good thing at the time, because I did feel like I had to get out there. But I did a lot of reading at that point. Like, I was just trying to just consume as much as I could to understand what are the areas of my career that I wanted to really push on and explore and challenge myself with. And I think that's the right time to do it. I was also fortunate enough to have a partner who could support us for a while. And I knew this was probably going to happen. So when I lived in New York, I did do like a year of pullback in New York, where I was like, I'm not going to go to the bar tonight, you guys. I don't need to buy 4 drinks. Like, I'm going to save my money, because I know eventually I'm moving and I'm going to need that little nest egg, so I don't feel so stressed out about it. And I can.
So you're like practical.
I'm incredibly practical and logical. I'm a Capricorn. So I'm not like fly by the seat of your pants impulsive, but I like to plan so that I can be impulsive, which makes no sense.
Well, how does that help? Before we go to that thread, you also said, when you moved to the Bay Area and someone said, you should come meet these people at the agency, you said something about being a junior is such a grind. Talk about that now with the wisdom that you have, that you've earned.
Yeah.
And kind of how you lead when I'm sure, especially right now, as agencies are churning and people are jumping from job to job, how do you help new people, young people in this industry navigate that?
Yeah, I think I now reflect on that time being a junior, and it was such a grind. But everybody that I knew back when we were all juniors the great ones are doing these incredible things in their careers. And we talk a lot about it now, that those moments where you were like, yeah, I was in an edit suite with my creative director until 2 a.m. because that thing had to just get done. I was sitting on the floor looking at proofs for these print ads with the, with the red pen marking things up. And it's just like a weird time. And all of those moments were those moments that make you who you are in the future and in your career. So they're going to always be those building block moments. So now when I have juniors, and juniors is such a wide range now, right? It could be 0 to 4 years, really. I mean, you're growing and learning every day, and marketing and advertising is evolving so quickly that you could be a junior in one aspect of your career, but really senior in another.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So they think it's just this constant learning that you're doing. But I try and remind everybody that those moments are the ones that you're going to learn the most from. I tell my teams the failures, obviously, is where you're going to learn the most, actually, more than the successes. And I think they take that to heart a lot. And I think now, knowing what a grind it was for me and for juniors, I try to spend more time having one-on-ones or encouraging their direct reports to do more one-on-ones with them. Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people maybe didn't do a lot with us in our generation, which was just
I never had that.
Pull you aside and be like, hey, today was really tough. Let's talk about why it was really tough. And like, what are we learning from this moment? And like, how are you feeling about it? And just like having that like 10-minute conversation that I think actually goes a really long way.
Yeah.
And having someone feel like they're being supported and nurtured, and that they can see the nugget that they need to take away from this moment in a way that maybe we would have had to do more self-reflection to get there. But you can have that conversation and they have that light bulb moment much sooner. So their growth can be accelerated, which I think in this moment in marketing that we're living is necessary, because things are evolving really quickly. So you want to help people get there faster.
Or even if the growth is not necessarily moving faster, they're recognizing milestones. So they still, I'm sure I had to make some mistakes 3 or 4 times before I was like, oh, I get it now. But at least sitting down with someone who says like, what did we learn from this? They still might make that mistake again, but at least it's a stronger registration of it for them. Yeah,
the recognition is there. It's going to be there sooner. Sometimes I'll sit there and just watch my team make mistakes, because I'm like, it's not going to be a bad one, but they need to learn from this moment right now. And then we're going to talk about it. And I think they get more from that experience.
Yeah. And you let them find their way through it, because then they're able to also say, yeah, I know I did make this mistake. Here's what I did to fix it. And then you're talking about the positive outcome that was achieved ultimately.
Yeah. And you don't want them to get the like, let me tell you how I would do it, to your point. Like, we need them to feel like, I'm going through the motions. I'm feeling this feeling. I know what the conversation needs to look like. What are the words I'm using to get this and this outcome to happen? Like, it's coming from them. And I think that's going to have a longer lasting effect on their like growth and trajectory than me telling them exactly what should have happened.
But you do not seem like a preachy kind of person at all. So how do you show them like this is the right path? And how much vulnerability do you show when you're kind of walking them through that, or letting them explain, or doing that post event discussion?
I do a lot of listening. I think that's something that this like entire world doesn't do enough of, to be honest, right now. So I try and sit back and listen a little bit more than actually speaking. I also try to make sure that they're feeling really supported. So I tend to be more vulnerable, I think, than probably a lot of people in my position, because I want them to understand that I've been there before. I know what they're going through, what they're feeling. And I think having someone express that vulnerability is going to allow you to feel like you're in a safe enough space for you to express your vulnerability, and then ask questions. Because I think a lot of people also just don't feel safe enough to ask questions. And those are the types of environments where you're not going to get the best work. So it's about just creating those spaces where people just are okay feeling vulnerable and being able to open themselves up to accept other outcomes that maybe they hadn't considered.
Yeah. And how do you get them to get there? Sometimes either, especially when you're new in your career, you don't want to admit, I don't know what I was doing, or it's hard to say that, especially in a pretty competitive industry that we're in. Failure is, not everybody has the same attitude about failure as you just shared. So how do you get them to say like, oh yeah, I really screwed that. I really screwed that up, which you need to be able to do for yourself if you're going to grow from it.
Yeah. I honestly think it's about consistency. So I'm constantly trying to have those conversations, giving them a little slack and going like, hey, tell me what you were thinking about that. I'm just trying to be there. And I think that consistency allows them to feel like there is safety and they can trust me. And I think trust is a huge thing as well. It's all hand in hand. And I also do the same coaching for the direct reports so that they are like the same behaviors being from the top to the bottom of the chain, just knowing that if there's a constant conversation, feedback cycle, that eventually people, even if it's not the first time or the second time where they're like, oh my God, I totally messed up, but eventually they will get to a place where they're feeling safe enough to be able to say those words. And I think a lot of it also is myself sometimes saying in these moments like, oh my God, you guys, I totally messed up. It's on me. And having them see that I can do that as well. And it's that I'm still feeling safe enough to do that. Hopefully will allow them the same space.
Is that kind of the foundation of trust, is being able to share your own mistakes and proactively say like, well, let me tell you how I messed this up for you.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with client relationships in the same way, where I find the best relationships come from transparency, where you're like, here's what we're doing. Here's what the thought process was. Here's what might scare you. And here's why we think it's exciting. And then have the client go through a meeting with some sort of expectation set. And then after the meeting, then feeling hopefully good enough to call you and be like, you were right about everything you just said. Also, that was horrendous. And you could be like, I totally understand why you say that, but at least you can have a one-on-one, a back and forth, and have them again feel safe enough to be like, let me tell you everything.
Yeah.
You created that back and forth and that sense of trust and transparency, which I think is critical.
It's a fine line too, because there's some things that happen in the day-to-day work that look like they could be the Hindenburg, and let's just navigate through it. We don't have to call anybody. Let's figure out we're going to come up with a solution. And then after the fact, you could go, hey, look, this is what happened. This got screwed up, but here's what we did to fix it. And you're reporting it that way versus like a blow by blow, freaking everybody out over at the brand that's saying like, what are they doing over there?
Yeah, totally. And you want those clients, somebody expressed to me recently, you want to get to a place where you're in a text conversation with the client, because that's when you've achieved a level of trust where it's like, I can interrupt your Sunday brunch really quick and be like, oh my God, really fast. This interesting insight just happened. I got a text from the creative director. Are you cool if we pivot a little bit? And you want someone to be like, yes, that sounds great. Or actually the CEO is already expecting XYZ. Can we not? And then you've already established that.
And that's the same for your team.
1000%.
You want to get to that same level of intimacy of being able to reach out to someone and get them. I think we underestimate how intimate it is to be able to get into someone's like particular. I'm holding up my phone here.
I see this.
Their particular space and their device. You know, it's one thing to be a creep and slide into someone's DMs, but when you're in a text exchange with someone, that's in the palm of their hand. Mm-hmm. You know, there's something to that we pretty much underestimate, I think.
Yeah, I think for sure. It's almost like the new phone call. Like now when your phone rings, you're like, who's calling me?
Yeah, what psycho actually knows how to use the phone app?
Is this? But with text message, it's like, especially with clients, I would say, that's a specific level of intimacy. I like that word, actually. That is a new frontier for me where I'm like, oh, I do have great text message conversations with a lot of my clients. That's great. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, you didn't realize, you're like, oh, I'm doing good.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's exciting. And then I guess to your point with my direct reports and things, that they feel safe enough to just text me randomly. And I'm like, yeah, please do that. I would prefer you do that than hold it in and be upset.
Yeah, and especially now, since we've been remote for, I mean, you've mentioned before that you've been remote for a while, but going on to year 3 of craziness of what we've been dealing with, how have you managed the transition from everybody in the building to everybody remote to whatever the next frontier is going to be? How do you maintain that level of trust when you're a person on a box and a glass screen?
It's really difficult. Like if I were to sit here and be like, it was amazing, we were great at all things, I would be lying, and anyone who tells you that they're great at all those things is lying. It's really hard. I also think in our field, when you're talking about creativity and the vulnerability that it takes to get to wonderful ideas, and also the level of coordination when you're thinking about marketing plans and comms, and there's just a lot of people required to get to great work in our field. And so I think it's really, really hard. What we've tried to do is make sure that people, to the point about text messages, are finding other ways to communicate that are outside of Zoom. Because like these spaces at first were like really awesome. You're like, I have a background. I'm in Paris today. I'm in Tokyo yesterday, virtual backgrounds and all kinds of things. And that stuff got old really fast. And you tried to find really different ways to make it a really inspiring place to be in a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And I do think over time, this now became so normal that it's the thing that you're like, I gotta get another Zoom. I have to run to the bathroom. I'm gonna be 2 minutes late. And so we've tried to just encourage people to find the text, other things, not rely on Slack all the time for everything. Just try to meet people where they need to be met and have those conversations so that teams can align on what they need to be successful. And it's not easy all the time. I mean, there's definite tension, and there's definite, like, all of a sudden silos start to form, and you're like, we need to rejigger the machine because people aren't talking to each other respectfully, appropriately. There's just dynamics that are being missed. And so once the world started to slowly open up, we also tried to encourage people to, like, how can we fly you to one place so you can regain that team dynamic?
Yeah.
That's so critical being in person. If everyone's comfortable, like if you don't want to be there, that's totally fine too. But it's necessary over time. You don't need it every day, but you definitely need to find that. We have found that when we meet with our clients, for example, in person after 2 years, you just get, you're like sitting in a conference room and the thing's coming down for the screen and you're getting goosebumps and you're like, why am I getting goosebumps? This is weird, but it's amazing and magical. And you forget the energy and the work that really gets done sitting in a room with someone. So we're just trying to encourage people to be flexible and communicate. And then when things feel icky, express that, because I think that's where you actually need to just like have that conversation and have everyone talk about that so that you can move past it and find the dynamic shift that needs to occur so that you can continue to do the work that everybody came to this agency to do.
Yeah, the allure of Slack for agencies and for enterprises is that all those text conversations would be funneled into one place. Slack wants you to believe that it creates some kind of historical document, which is horseshit.
You can't search it. It's the worst search ever.
I know. It's a great idea, but come on, guys. It's not. There's already wikis. Like this already existed, if that's what it was. But the idea of encouraging people to communicate in the channel that they are more comfortable with, that creates kind of a burden in a way, because then you have to be aware of, oh, well, maybe they messaged me over here. Maybe they messaged me over there. It could be an email. It could be a text. It could be, now I have to do this. So how big is MUH-TAY-ZIK HOF-FER?
I think we're like 60-ish.
Okay, yeah, that's the
great
magic.
Day. Yeah,
that's what I think is the magic number. Is 60 becomes like the culture really has to be clung to when you get bigger than 60.
Yeah.
From my experience, how do you keep everybody clinging to it?
Oh my gosh.
Or how have you so far?
Yeah. I think that we have a weekly meeting, an all agency, which we can still do because we're, 60-ish people. It's sacred time. So we try to make sure that everyone can attend. We don't really encourage anybody to book client meetings and things over. And I think a lot of our clients realize that that's sacred time for us, especially now that we're all remote. And we've got, like I mentioned before our call, nearly half of our workforce is forever remote, which is super cool.
And was it that way before?
No.
No. So over time, you've just started hiring talent.
One person who was permanent remote, and that's because they sat on client site before the pandemic. And now we're nearly half permanent remote.
Wow. That's a huge switch. I wonder how common that is from in the agency world. Have you talked to other people that are going through the same type of growth trajectory?
You know what? My talent human has told me that a lot of agencies are trying it, but at the same time, there is going to be a default where people eventually won't be making that accommodation. And they just are going to want to at least have people close enough where if they wanted people to come in, they could. I think we've just realized that we're never going to get to the place where we have the best talent for the briefs that we're getting if we limit ourselves to Bay Area only. So I really think we have like 10 people who are sitting in LA right now. Like we're just cool with it. And as long as the work's getting done and at the quality that we all expect and we're available to ourselves and our clients, then it's fine. The culture is tricky for sure, because you're trying to make sure that you keep the things that matter intact from a culture standpoint. So we've always had these like moments during the year that we consider really critical to culture. Our summer party, so cliche agency, but is epic always. So we try to do that. We haven't been able to do that now for 2 years. So this year we're like, it's going to happen. Fingers crossed. Our Christmas party. And then we do like biannual meetings for the entire company to come together. We kind of talk about the vision for the year, things like that. So we try to keep the milestones in place at least. And then at that weekly meeting that I mentioned, we try to infuse a piece of conversation that's guided by a creative director or a strategist or whomever to keep the culture alive. So people understand what we mean when we're talking about our agency vision and all those things. But it's definitely not easy.
How do you mentioned keeping people glued to or aware of those things that matter. Mm-hmm. How do you even define those things that matter? It's when everybody's in one space, even for your company meeting, everybody was in a conference room together, potentially, or in the lobby or wherever you had the meeting. But now with people diffuse, and that might be their only exposure is looking at 60 rectangles for that duration of that meeting. And then they go back to their work, which is meetings with smaller groups and their own individual work. How do you point out what is important to the agency and what is important to the culture? What is it that you're threading through everything?
Yeah, I do think that we try to make sure that all of our department heads and leadership have a really clear understanding of the vision and what we're trying to achieve and what that means to us, so that they can continue, even in their smaller conversations, continue to articulate that and make sure that meaning is known. I think that's one of the bigger things that we try to make sure is happening. And this is really random and small, but again, our head of talent and HR team, they are constantly just sending out little things during holidays and working with our creative teams, for example, to write like little pieces of copy or whatever that just continue to make that vibe that you would have felt when you walked off the elevators, and like sending it to you with like a whole tray of donuts. We were very into cookies over this break. So there's a company in LA, not a sponsored ad, but this place called Stuffed Cookies in LA, and they're amazing. And so they became the thing, and the agency was like, where are my stuffed cookies? It's St. Patrick's Day. Where's the delivery? There's little things like that where people come to expect that they be like randomly become pieces of culture. And it's just something that the teams will self-reflect on one another, and then that feeds that culture. So it doesn't always have to come from the top if you're doing it well. That's awesome. Yeah.
When you're hiring, how do you look at culture as a criteria? There's always this debate about culture fit and whether that was good or bad. Now that we're all remote, or you're at least 50% remote, has that changed the way you look at, is this person a culture fit, or what do they add to the culture, or how does that conversation change?
Yeah, we stopped talking about the word culture fit, actually.
Yeah.
Probably a year or two ago. We just tried to shift how we were thinking about hiring. We've got, we tried to do this whole trying to remove bias from hiring. So we're doing more formalized questionnaires and things. We have different departments of people meeting with all of our candidates.
Nice.
And I think that's been really helpful because you do get a wide swath of like very junior, very senior, creative strategists, meeting all types of people, not necessarily even like if they're coming in to work on one client, maybe they're meeting with people from another client group. And I think that helps have everyone feel like they also have not an opinion, but they can bring forth an insight from a conversation they had with the candidate and say, this felt interesting to me for this reason, or I loved how they talked about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so they're contributing to what's being built.
Yeah, so that there's to your point, a contribution to that culture that we're creating organically. And I do love that we stopped using those words like, oh, I just love them. They totally fit the culture. And I was like, I want actually someone who evolves the culture, who makes us feel different about the culture. Those are the types of people who you want to bring into the space that are going to just shake things up a little bit. And that's what we're seeking now, is just making sure that we're bringing in different types of voices and humans, just to make sure that we get smarter and can think about things differently. And that feels like what you should be doing in a creative agency, not having just cookie cutter humans of a creative department, for example.
Especially in a creative department where it's like, well, why, if it's so creative, why do they all look and dress and act the same and say the same things?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think, or what kind of feedback have you gotten as you've started to plan that return to part-time in the office?
Well, we just put a survey out yesterday, so I can let you know later this week.
Okay. I jumped the gun on that.
Yeah, we've been telling everyone for a couple of weeks now that that's the plan. We still have a lot of things we need to evolve. This is really feels minor, but is really major. Just trying to make sure the conference rooms are spaces where people can feel like they're still having this one-to-one, and they're not like facing a table, but then the people, you know what I mean? Those things which will take away that connection that we've all felt with Zoom, which is great. So we're reworking conference rooms and things like that. But thus far, I think there's a lot of folks who are ready for a sense of like, I can have the experience that I want. So I can be in person when I want to be or when I feel like I need to be. And I can be remote when I need to be, because it allows me, like, for example, this morning, where I had to get my kid out the door by 7:55 so I can get on the phone on this call with you. But I could do that because I don't have to then rush to get to the office at 9. Like there's flexibility in my life, and I think in all of our lives, that we now have gotten used to. And I think for the better, all of our lives can evolve to the things that matter more. So for me, it's like, I have a kid now. This is new. So I'd like to spend more time with him in the morning. So like, that would be fun for me to not have that sense of dread every day. Like I have to get in the shower so I can get to the office by 9:30. And it's a whole thing.
The domino effect.
Yeah. So I think that everyone's feeling that notion of flexibility and having it fit into their lives, which is helpful. So thus far, we haven't had the sense of dread, but I'll let you know what the survey says. It may actually tell me something completely different. Yeah. But I value that input. I think that's the other thing, is you want to make sure that when you're taking those types of surveys, that you're going to take it in and then decide if you need to evolve based on that.
That's where I was just going, is that your gut reaction was like, well, I haven't seen the results of the survey yet, so I can't answer your question, which tells me you're actually going to read it and not just, you didn't just do it as lip service to be like, well, we did a survey and here's the plan we had already created.
Yeah.
You didn't hate it, so we're still doing it.
Yeah. I mean, the goal is always going to be to take in the input and then decide whether we need to change or evolve dynamics of the plan. And I think that's just going to be the world we live in for the next handful of years, is just being cool with the flexibility and the ability to change when you have to. And I think that's okay. And as long as you're communicating that with your teams, making sure they're really clear that we're ready to flex. So if a flex thing, like us even having to flex, makes you uncomfortable as a human, then maybe this is not the place for you, because like we will have to adjust and react to the different dynamics that are being thrown with this pandemic that we're dealing with, or other things too. You know,
when you walked into Goodby, you got that sense of what, I've never been in the building, but when you walked in there, you got the sense of what it would be like to work there. And I think we've both had that experience of walking into an agency where you felt blown away by the energy, or a company in general, or you walked in and you're like, oh, Jesus. I was on an interview once, and the person interviewing me was one of the principals, and like, I don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes in, she was like, do you not want to be here? And I was like, no. She was like, you can go. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. It was just, I could tell it was just I was not the right person to be working at that place. Mm-hmm. And when you're hiring people remote, because so many companies are going through the same thing where they're open to the idea of this remote workforce and like, let's pull talent that really gets what we're trying to do from anywhere. Great. How do those people get the vibe? How do they get the energy of the company? How do you make sure that they understand? How do you transmit it to them? So when they can't walk into a lobby and see the art and understand that there's cookies on the table that sound amazing and I'm going to order some.
Yeah. I'm totally going to send you some. It's tricky, but completely doable when you put some thought into it. And again, to the point of evolving, like constantly evolving based on the learnings. I mean, great resignation stuff, right? So you've got a lot of people coming in and out the doors right now. That's everywhere. Yeah. In every industry. So I'm just totally don't come and take my head of talent in HR because they're incredible, but our team does a great job of taking all of those learnings from exit interviews, for example, or they do 30-day feedback. They'll like talk to somebody 30 days in and be like, how was your experience coming in? What did you wish you would have learned? Who are the people you wish you would have spoken to? And we try to then evolve how we're getting people in the doors and their experience in the first 30 days. And then when it comes to exit interviews, we take all of that really seriously and go, okay, like what should we be changing based on these patterns that we may be seeing? So I think when it comes to the culture, we've tried to do things like our head of creative, my partner, Joel, he will, every time we have a new person come in, he'll walk them through, like, here's who we are as an agency. He walks them through the deck. He does a Q&A with them. We have our head of business, our new business do like really lightweight creds. So people understand who we are as an agency, the work that we've been doing for many, many years that we're really proud of, just have them get a taste of all that. Everybody gets cookies when they come in the door. So we're trying to infuse that in organic ways and also in ways that allow people to really understand visually who we are as an agency. And unfortunately, it's with decks and things like that. But when we do have the opportunity to get people in person, which happens now 2 or 3 times a year, we try to make sure that they're infusing with the right groups of people too, like their team members, or if they're on the social team, then like making sure they have a lot of quality time with that team. So they can really understand those relationships and how critical they are to the work that they're doing every day. So I think it's a super easy thing, but we do try and make sure that we're thinking through who should they be meeting? Why? What type of conversations should they be having? What materials do we need to make sure people see in the first 30 days? And then we do one-on-ones. So with all the leadership team, anybody who starts gets a one-on-one with everybody who's on the leadership team. And that's also really cool because it allows them to ask a lot of questions that they probably wouldn't be able to ask, like our head of production. If you're like a junior account person starting and you have a one-on-one with our head of production for 30 minutes, like that's not something that a lot of people get to do. And then she's an incredibly interesting human as well. So you have 30 minutes to just be like, let's talk about who you are. What are you about? What are we really proud of and want to be doing more of? And I think those conversations and interactions also just help infuse that culture into somebody who may never set foot in our walls more than once or twice a year.
How big was the shop when you added a head of talent?
Probably too small.
Yeah. But I mean, even at 60, I'm like, it just occurred to me that the program you just outlined is pretty sophisticated. Yes. And I was thinking like, well, now I know why nobody does it because that's a lot of work. That's hard. The
pain of my CEO or my CFO every day going like, we're like a 90 person shut up for a 90 to 100 person organization. I was like, totally. But our talent and our product is better because
we're set up to get to 90.
Set up already to get to 90 or 120
or whatever. Catch up when we get to 90 to find a person who understands what we're doing that doesn't have to create all these processes.
Exactly. It's set up. And I think that's one of the benefits that we have. And we have a great feedback loop that's also set up and peer reviews and feedback. And we're just trying to create an organization where people are listening a lot so that we can evolve as quickly as we need to and hopefully have enough input that we're not making this shit up all the time.
I know. God, so much of it is like, let's try this. How hard was it hard to get buy-in from, I mean, you are one of the leaders, but from the entire leadership team, whatever that looks like, for committing to talent, committing to hiring a talent officer or a talent leader to all these programs, or was everybody kind of like, no, this is logical, it makes sense?
Everybody has always been on board. I think especially that role, that head of talent, HR, humans, ops, that whole thing is just so critical to having an operation that values the humans that are in the walls. And then continuing to give them places to evolve and grow in a meaningful way that doesn't feel like complete lip service, to your point earlier. It's like, I totally care about your growth and trajectory. It's like, we actually have peer feedback loops, and we have the managers meet with them and create growth plans, and we talk through those things, and we have check-ins. Like, it's constant. And my CFO was like, this is crazy. And I was like, but this is how we get to talent who's doing the caliber of work that we want to be doing as an organization on behalf of our kick-ass clients.
Yeah. It just occurred to me that you're going to be besieged with resumes and books after this. So
sorry,
I'll take a referral. I'll take a referral bonus on any of those people. I did not intend this to be an infomercial for.
Sorry, that was not about the intention.
Hiring and culture. No, it's good.
I wish more organizations did it, is why. And I think that more organizations did it and that we talked about it so that clients could understand the value of bringing on an agency, and sometimes why that can be a really expensive expense.
What do the clients feel it? Do they recognize the benefit, or does it yield a benefit that the clients get? Beside it being like a cool place to work and happier employees that want to stay longer, do the clients see a benefit as the work? Do you feel like the work is better?
I think the work is better because we're bringing in different dynamics of people who bring interesting things to every conversation. I'm like sitting here going like, I can't plug people because people are going to want to take them. But I have an incredible social human who we brought to one of our client meetings in like November. And he kept saying, I heard this thing on TikTok. And everything he said was, oh, I heard this thing on TikTok. And afterwards, the client was like, I love him. He just brings such an interesting flavor to every conversation. And you're like, yeah. And he was vetted, and we sourced him, and we had many conversations. He ended up walking away from us. 3 months later, he goes, I made a mistake. I love you guys. We brought him back. People feel that culture, and our clients feel that culture. And I think that's really critical. And we put a lot of work into talent. And I think that actually will, over time, benefit us. But now you're making me think, I think we probably need to make a more concerted effort to help people understand everything that goes into developing our talent.
Yeah.
Revelation, light bulb. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, that's what I do. I mean, it sounds like you have a pretty good program, so I'm taking zero credit. Why don't more agencies do this?
I mean, to what you said, it's super labor intensive. Financially, there's a lot of dynamics tied to that too. So I understand that, and budgets are slim. So, often things are pretty razor thin, unfortunately. But you hope that the investments that you make in things like talent, again, over time will pay off. And so I wish that we all put a little bit more energy and effort into it. I also think we need to stop thinking that this talent is disposable. We actually can develop and grow them and make them great and have them move on and move to another agency and be great there too.
Yes.
And I think that's what we want to do. We want people to go, oh, they were at MUH-TAY-ZIK HOF-FER. They're great. That's my dream. I just want everyone to come in and out of our doors and just have someone go, oh yeah, that place is great. That place is great. We should hire that person. That place is great.
Yeah, that person has been trained. There is something to that. That's like, oh yeah, that person knows what they're doing. If they came from that shop, if they work with those people, they're good. Yeah.
They have a taste level. They understand the importance of strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And I want that for everybody who comes in and out of our doors, people who work with me. I want them to be better than I ever could have been. That's actually what you want. And great talent.
Well, that sounds like it's kind of aiming pretty high.
I hope so. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Carolina, it was wonderful to talk to you. Where can people find you online?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, as is everybody on the planet. I'm on Twitter, but I'm often plugging our work because it's super cool.
That's okay. Don't apologize for plugging your work. If people find me on LinkedIn, they can find Carolina because I just connected with her. So
sweet.
Nice. So thank you so much. This is a great conversation. It's exactly what I was hoping to talk to you about. Thank you for making time for me.
This was honestly an absolute delight. Thank you, Adam.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Strategy Inside Everything is produced by me, Adam Pierno. If you like what you've heard, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Actually, I have no idea if that helps or if it's ever done anybody any good. If you really want to help the show and you like what you've heard, share it with someone else you think will dig it. That's the best way to help the show and keep the conversation growing. If you have an idea, a question, or want to push back, go to that'snotaninsight.com, where you can send me a message or leave me a voicemail that will be added to future shows. Music for the Strategy Inside Everything is by Saw Square Noise. For more information on me, you can go to adampierno.com to learn about my books, my speaking, and my consulting practice. Thanks for listening.